Welcome to the Wally Report. Listen, everybody, it is the triumphant return. We are back for episode 2 of the Wally Report. People have been barging down doors. They have been texting. They have been emailing. They have been doing everything to get this second episode, and it is finally upon us. Again, this is Ari Weiss, your lovely host. Christopher Devine, my co-host. Christopher, how are you doing?
I'm I'm delighted to be back, Ari, and I think that what I said last time proved to be true. I said that what we're doing here and what you're doing in particular is offering a tremendous public service, and the feedback that we received from folks after episode 1 corroborates that. People have thanked us for lending our point of view to their lives and to helping them make decisions about what shows to watch. We have people have said, I watched The Bear and I love it, and it's made my life better. We are making people's lives better. And so I'm thrilled to be back and to be doing this with you again.
Yeah, I'm totally with you. I've had a bunch of different people that just started Top Boy. They didn't even know about the show. They're loving it. I have some coworkers that, again, like you said, have watched The Bear, and a lot of people just are shocked by the amazing nature of our list, and it's improving lives already, right? So that's what we're here to do now. I'm just also very excited about the success of the show. This it took a little work, and now it's out there, and I just I love doing this. So we're very happy. We got listeners all over the place commenting, and I think this is going to be a great series. So one thing I want to say before we get into our show, our episode here, is we might even eventually, and we've talked about this before, we might have to start doing these 2 times a month, because I do feel like there was definitely some time between the last episode, and we had a couple people already being like, well, when's the next one? And we do have other podcasts that are coming out weekly. Sorry, guys, we can't get there yet, but maybe, within a couple months, if the listen rate is super hot, we might have to think about 2 a month. So we'll get there. We want to start this first standard show because if you all remember, the first one was sort of like a special elongated premiere episode that went through a lot of themes and concepts. Now we know all of those, and this is going to be more of sort of our monthly standard show. And one of the new segments to start the way is a hot topic, a key insight, or a rant segment. So I'm going to start with mine. And for anybody that knows me knows that I am a sport junkie as well. So I think we got to talk about the New York Rangers here. I mean, let's get serious. This is the best the best thing that has happened to sports in a very long time. For people that don't know, my Rangers have just clinched. We're in the Eastern Conference Finals, and we knocked out the most hated foe, the dastardly Carolina Hurricanes. Now, here's a couple crazy things, Christopher, because I like the history. The last time the Rangers won, and you should know this since you're now technically a New York Felicino, the Rangers last won in 1994, which is 30 years to the date. I was 15, and I remember it was like it was the huge year in Mark Messier. He made a lot of promises, and they delivered. Okay, so 30 years later, mostly 30 years of agony in my life, we've only gotten to the finals a couple times during that run. Okay, and there's a lot of similarities to that 94 championship. So we're hoping that this is finally the year. I don't want to jinx us. No pun to a show that we might be talking later on this podcast there, the jinx. I do want to say that now we're against the Florida Panthers, okay, and game 1 is Wednesday. So I know you're not a top sports fellow, but I might need you to even start, supporting and paying attention because this is, you're living by that city. So that's my big hot topic for the month. Something from you.
So first, congratulations on the New York Rangers. I think that's great. I want to set expectations. I am not going to be watching any hockey. Um, not not now and not in the future. Um, and you referred to me as technically a New Yorker. You know, I actually have a New York State birth certificate. I was born in the state of New York, so I am a lifelong New Yorker, but I am not a lifelong
Okay.
hockey fan. However, I am always pleased to see a New York team do well, unless it turns out to be the Eastern Conference Finals. NBA Finals turn out to be the Knicks and the Celtics, in which case I will be rooting for the Celtics. What I want to talk about, though, is not sports, Ari. I want to talk about something different, and it's a topic that's near and dear to my heart, and that topic is historic preservation, specifically the preservation of landmarked buildings in New York City. So, this is a topic that really sort of merits its own podcast. There are a couple of really nice, very well put together podcasts about the history of New York City, and I wouldn't even dare compete with them. But the topic itself is enough to merit an entire podcast. There's one building in particular, though, that's really sort of been eating away at me. Are you familiar with there is a store on the corner of 7th Avenue South and Christopher Street in the West Village called Village Cigars? Okay, it is a little triangular red store with those huge signs with the white lettering outside that say it says Village Cigars. It's an iconic corner in Greenwich
I
Village.
mean, I was a West Village guy. That was always like my favorite part of town. So I feel like I've walked by
I'm
it. So
certain
yeah.
you've walked by it, and it's in TV shows and it's in movies. Well, so Village Cigars opened up in 1922. The building was built in 1921, and Village Cigars opened up in 1922. It was originally United Cigars, which was a chain of tobacco stores, and by the late 20s, it was one of 3,000 locations, United Cigar locations in the United States. In the 1960s, it changed its name from United Cigars to Village Cigars, and it has remained Village Cigars to this day. Well, until February, when the store went out of business.
Oh,
And so, yeah, 102 years, and it went out of business. And the difficult thing there is that the signage outside Village Cigars has become iconic, right? And it's something
mm,
that people sort of associate with Greenwich Village. Well, the building itself is protected under the landmarks law. So any modification to the building would require approval by the Landmarks Preservation Commission of New York City. Signage is not protected because signage is considered ephemeral. It's advertising a business. So even though this signage is iconic, the next business that goes in there could pull it all down, and probably will, unless it's a cigar store. Um,
wow.
yeah,
So
pull
you're
it all down.
devastated, is what you're
And
saying. You're devastated of it.
I'm completely devastated because there goes this amazing business that's been on on this street corner for more than 100 years with signage that's been there since the 1960s, gone.
S-
Overnight too. There was no warning. We didn't even have time to prepare for
So
this.
you're saying like this could be the same feeling that I would get from a Rangers playoff loss or a Rangers championship loss is the signage being taken down from this cigar shop could equal that devastating type feeling.
I appreciate the ability, or the sort of the attempt to relate. I want to suggest it's a little bit more serious than that, and the reason is that if the range the reason is that if the Rangers lose, you have next season. Village Cigars doesn't have next season. It's done. That's it.
Okay.
It would be like, you know what? It would be like if the Rangers were
Stop being a
traded to
franchise.
yeah, we're traded to another or brought to another city.
Okay. The last thing I will say on this though is that you're not even really a cigar fellow, but just because it's an iconic
because of the iconic
storefront
signage.
and the
Yeah. But the other
signage.
thing is that
Okay,
vintage
yeah,
cigars in its heyday in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, they sold stationery, they sold umbrellas, they sold toys, they sold cameras. All of this was like there was, all sorts of signs in the window advertising all of these things. So it was a convenience store, just happened to be named cigars. And it's more recently, it's focused mostly on tobacco products. So yeah, it doesn't have an affinity, have to do with my affinity for tobacco products, which I don't have
yeah,
an
yeah.
affinity for. It has everything to do with the building and the establishment's history in New York City.
Okay, so those are our hot topics for the month. Now, just going back to my sports topic, I do want to say there is some fans, and I will bring up his name later, that are already nudging us to, hey, get to some sport episodes, but that's still going to be probably 6 months to a year away. But that Rangers, bit could segue nicely into some sport episodes in the future. So I do want to go through some housekeeping items now from episode 1. There was a lot in that premiere episode. There was a couple things I need to unpack a little bit that I felt that I missed. And I just want to go back over a couple key things before we get into. I know everybody's waiting for the top 5 of May 2024. People are chomping at the bit for that, but we're going to make them wait just like we did in that first episode. So I want to go back to the number 1 and number 2 shows of last year, which of course Succession being number 1, The Bear being Succession number 2, The Bear number 1. Okay. I missed saying what the network was, the providers, and I want to be very militant with that, just so the listeners are always getting that proper service when they come to the Wally Report. Okay. So for people out there, Succession is HBO Max, The Bear is FX on Hulu. I want to just mention, what does that mean really quickly? Of course, there's Hulu originals, and then there's also FX shows. Recently, there's been a partnership between FX and Hulu, so that on Hulu, you can watch all the FX originals. The weird thing about The Bear, however, and I had to look this up just to double check, it's technically considered an FX show, but it's only streaming on Hulu. You can't go to FX and just watch The Bear. So anyway, that's why it's called FX on Hulu. So just in case people were confused, I wanted to bring that up. So, and then since I was,
We really do
yeah,
need to have an episode. I'm glad you shared that sort of brief overview. We need to have an episode where we really dive into what's going on with all these streaming services, because it's just very confusing. I think even if you pay close attention, it's confusing. It's hard to keep up with. But I think for our
totally.
audience, we can really help people out.
Yeah, I think either next month or the following month we'll do our standard show, and then maybe we'll do a special show where literally we just go through every streaming service that, of course, is Wally Report approved, right? Which I'm going to list again later, just for people's minds. So while we were checking the providers, the networks for those shows, I also would like to just do a quick countdown. So technically, we did a top 8. I'm going to count my top 7 and your 1. Now, I know you talked about Severance last time, which we will get into, and you didn't really, we just mentioned briefly Gilded Age. Now, I'd like to put both of them on there, but technically Severance was 2022. So right now we just have a top 8. It's my top 7 and your Gilded Age. If you put those all together, 3 of them were Netflix, 3 of them were HBO Max, 1 was Prime Video, Amazon, we all have that, and 1 was FX on Hulu that we just mentioned. So as the months go along, I'm going to be doing tallies, okay, of the network, the leaders, to really see at the end of the year, which provider, which streaming service really killed it in the year, okay? And then at the end of the year, there always will be this ceremonial top 10, and then that will always count down, okay? So the other thing that I wanted to do here, because I was talking about Succession, you sniped in and you did a little Billions, and I do want to address that too, but it threw me off a little bit, and I feel like I didn't do Succession justice. I feel like I kind of downplayed it. There's great dialogue. Okay, let's move on. And I want to go back. I don't think I did justice to Succession. It is an amazing show. It was 4 seasons of brilliance. It is in a top 20 all time on my list. And I would say it's some of the greatest writing, dialogue writing in television history. So I just want to give it its due. Okay. The acting's just fantastic. I don't know. I think especially the first season and in the second season, I don't know if I love the final couple seasons as much, but still, I mean, it's definitely a top 20 all time show. So I don't want people to think I just sort of dismissed it last time. If you need a show that you haven't watched and you need, a couple seasons to go back like the way you like to do it, I got to give it up for that show. Okay. And then I also want to talk about Billions. Um, I also felt maybe I was a bit negative on the show. Listen, Billions season one of my favorite seasons of all time. Okay, it's on my single season list. There's a couple other great seasons. Um, I just think that over time, the writing kind of lost its way. We all love Paul Giamatti and we know Chuck's rants. And I think the way Chuck's dialogue was written was fantastic the first couple of seasons. And then the weird thing I thought that they did with the show is everybody started talking like Chuck with these weird examples from old rock bands and old medieval books and things like that. And then everybody knew the examples, even like that character Taylor, who's like 20 something. She would not know Bob Dylan lyrics. So I started getting annoyed by the just ridiculous writing. And I don't want the writers, if they ever come on the show, will gladly take you. I don't want anybody to say I'm dishing their. I think I just took it very personal because I was such a Billions fan. And I just think over time, it didn't end. And I'm not actually, I've actually stopped. I don't even know if you've watched the whole thing. I've stopped on the Prince season, and I'm not even back with the triumphant return of Axelrod. And I know I'm giving things away right now. Before I move on to your big Daisy Jones thing, any other just do you? And going back, hold on. Going back to your other comment last time, you did say that you read an article about how in Succession is probably more the way people actually talk. I would say it's definitely heightened. It's definitely also a little bit ridiculous, but it's so much more sophisticated and just well written. Where Billions just started getting, no one talks like that anymore. Maybe just Chuck, but everybody on the show, it just was really so. Any last, I mean, we can do a Billions later when we're doing our all-time countdown shows. I think it's in my top 40 of all time, right? I'll give it that. And I'll say that the single season is one of my favorite single seasons. Billions interjection from you, Mr. Devine.
Yeah, I mean, I think you and I are on the exact same page with respect to Billions, including where we are. I have not been able to get through the penultimate season. I'm in the middle of the Michael Prince season, and I just
Okay,
can't get
so
through it. I
right.
think that
Okay.
season one was fantastic. I think it sort of fell off the rails a bit. I think then they regained some of the credibility. I remember you sending me a text saying, I think it was during season 3, you said Billions is clean again. And
Yes, yeah, three
and
and
that's
four
and that's
probably.
yeah,
Yeah.
3 and 4. But then again, it sort of jumped the shark. And I want to get through it, and I want to get to the final season, but it's been a bit of a challenge. It's
Yes.
a show that has had its ups and downs, and it sounds to me, I still have not seen Succession in its entirety, but it sounds to me like if we're talking about consistency across seasons,
Mm.
Succession does outperform Billions.
Definitely. I mean, they made some mistakes in the final season. I'll wait till you watch it and then we can discuss. So, the next little segment here is also some key feedback commentary from episode 1, okay? That Christopher especially wants to dial in on a couple here. Daisy Jones and the Bear. We'll get to that 1 second. I also have a new thing that we're going to be doing on the show that I'm very excited about. I mentioned in the beginning that we're getting a lot of comments and keep them coming. We love them. We are going to dive into a couple of these comments and bring them into the show so that our listeners are connected and that they feel that we're taking some of their opinions very seriously, right? So throughout this little section, I'm going to bring some in. But before we do, I did my countdown, right? Christopher did rush out and watch Daisy Jones because he is a classic rock Felicino. Okay, and so of course you're going to go straight into that, and I think you were slightly displeased. I'll let you go, and then I'll do my rebuttal.
So here's the thing. First of all, again, thank you for the recommendation. I'm glad that I watched Daisy Jones, and I think that all of the individual performances in Daisy Jones were really commendable. I think each of the actors did a great job. I also understand that it is based on a novel, which I have not read. I have read some articles about the differences between the novel and the TV show. It sounds to me, based on those articles, like the television adaptation was relatively faithful to the novel, which doesn't always happen. So nice to know that as well. Everyone had positioned the show to me as, you know, based on or loosely based on Fleetwood Mac. And I was very excited about that because the story of Fleetwood Mac is fascinating. Okay. You have the story of Fleetwood Mac begins, I mean, it begins at the beginning of time, really. It begins begins in 1455 with the advent of the printing press. I mean, you could say that it begins at different points, but we'll start it in 1963 when a young British guitarist named Eric Clapton joined a band called the Yardbirds. He was a member of the Yardbirds for 2 years. In 1965, Eric Clapton left the Yardbirds and he joined John Mayall and the Blues Breakers. Interestingly, when he left the Yardbirds, he recommended that another young guitarist replace him in the Yardbirds, and that guitarist's name is Jimmy Page, who went on to start Led Zeppelin. Eric Clapton
Wow.
is now in John Mayall and the Blues Breakers. He leaves in 1966 to form Cream with Jack Bruce, who he had recorded with in John Mayall and the Blues Breakers, and Ginger Baker, who played drums in Cream. And Eric Clapton was replaced in John Mayall's group with a guy named Peter Green. And Peter Green played in John Mayall and the Blues Breakers for a few years alongside Mick Fleetwood, who was a drummer, and John McVie, who was a guitar player. And the three of them left John Mayall and went to start Fleetwood Mac. And Fleetwood Mac was a blues band. Okay.
Mm.
And if you listen to their early recordings, and it was actually originally called Peter Green's Fleetwood Mac. So it incorporated the three founders' names, Peter Green, Mick
Mm.
Fleetwood, and John McVie. And if you listen to these early recordings, I mean, it sounds nothing like the Fleetwood Mac that you think of from the mid 70s, the days of Lindsey Buckingham and Stevie Nicks. It was a blues band. And it slowly evolved over time. Christine Perfect, who later became Christine McVie, started recording with them in 1978. She officially joined the band in 1970. Peter Green left. Bob Welch joined the band. He was in Fleetwood Mac from 71 to 74. Bob Welch left. And then they were sort of at a crossroads. And what they decided to do, what Mick Fleetwood decided to do, is hire these two young musicians from California, Lindsey Buckingham and Stevie Nicks. 1975, they release Fleetwood Mac, which was not their first album called Fleetwood Mac, by the way. It sort of represents a rebirth of the group. And then 2 years later, 1977, they released Rumors. 1979, they released Tusk. 1982, they released Mirage. 1987, they released Tango in the Night. That story alone is fascinating. Then you look at the interpersonal dynamics. First, Christine Perfect marrying John McVie, then Buckingham and Nicks, who were in a relationship in 1975, joining the band. Then they split up. Then I think Stevie Nicks was having an affair with Mick Fleetwood, and Lindsey Buckingham started having an affair with Christine McVie. And I mean, it was just a mess. You
Mm-hmm.
add to that an immense amount of alcohol and cocaine, and recording sessions that lasted from 2 in the morning till 8 in the morning, because they would
Mm.
party and then they would record. and you have this like very high intense personal drama, this really really influential music being recorded, award-winning music being recorded, changing sort of the shape of rock and roll, and you've got a recipe for a great story. And then I turn on Daisy Jones, and it is a completely totally watered down version of this narrative that I've just described, and I'm thinking to myself the whole time, why not just make a movie about Fleetwood Mac, or a mini series about Fleetwood Mac? What a great story I just told, right? And I just
Yeah,
did
I
a
know.
tiny
Yeah.
little bit, and
Right. Right.
instead we get this kind of like, what felt a little bit more sort of like Almost Famous, or what's that
Yeah.
movie
Sure. Sure.
about those two Irish musicians. It
Hmm.
kind of had that vibe or that feel to it. So I was a little disappointed. Now I wonder what my experience would have been had I not been primed and told this is loosely based on Fleetwood Mac. I probably would have been a
Right.
little bit more forgiving. I will say though, my other gripe with the show is that I didn't find that all of the original music sounded as though it was recorded or written in the 1970s. And I think that you could easily say, oh, well, that's very difficult to do. But there are some really, really great examples of shows that, or movies that feature original music that perfectly captures the era in which the show is set. And I think the best example of that is an old movie with Tom Hanks called That Thing You Do. Do you remember That Thing You Do?
I didn't watch it.
Oh, you've got to watch it. So
Nah, because
I
it's
went back and
like,
watched
yeah.
parts of it. And it's a feel
Yeah.
good movie, but their songs sound just like the songs from the bands coming out of the early to mid 1960s. Really, really excellent uh, demonstration of how you can capture a time period, um, and recreate the music of that time period. And I feel like Daisy Jones didn't quite get there. The I will say this in defense of Daisy Jones, again, acting was wonderful, cinematography was great, art direction was wonderful. It was just sort of the premise and the writing that and the music that I didn't find lovely. The Chicago concert, that's what I was looking for the entire time. When she comes out on stage with
Hmm.
the black stuff on her eyes, and the guys have, just gotten into it, and and they're sweaty and they're dirty and they're on, like, that's what I was
Yes.
craving the entire time. So the show, it delivered. It delivered, but
Right.
I was hoping for a little bit more. And those are my thoughts on Daisy Jones.
So
It was not time poorly spent. It was time well spent. I'm glad I watched it. But I was hoping for something a little more.
yeah, and so I guess good points. All I would say, I guess for me, I don't think I knew that much about the real Fleetwood Mac story. I went and looked it up later after I became kind of obsessed with the show and did realize that Lindsey Buckingham and Stevie Nicks were actually together when they joined the band, which is obviously not what we see with the characters joining at different times and then kind of having the romance. Um, I do have to counter you a little bit though and say that the Honeycomb song, or at least let me, remember I sent you those recently, the Let Me Down Easy, they sound somewhat, I mean, at least Let Me Down Easy sounds pretty 70s. I gotta say some of them were impressive to me. I didn't love a lot of the songs from that his band, but any of the duets together I kind of liked. And I do feel that I'm with you, but I kind of just thought of, okay, I separated. I'm like, hey, I'm just thinking about this novel loosely based. It's kind of given me enough of the vibes. I did think it was a little bit too romance novel for me in certain areas, kind of like you said with Once, or one of the, or Almost Famous ish. But I gotta say that the episode, and I don't want to give stuff away. I'm borderline spoilers. The episode where they've come together and are writing that song together, to me was just so amazingly moving. Like, I don't know if I've had that type of emotional investment in a show in a long time, to where they go from fighting, they're at the producer's house, they just finally start getting along, they write the song. And I was floored. So I let other things slide because that was so impressive to me. I do say later, though, at the concerts, they didn't go back and play enough of those songs that you loved from that recording session. They kept playing these other songs. I'm like, wait, what are the anyway? So I'm with you somewhat. So, okay, let's move on though. Um, but I like this. My sister is gonna just she's not gonna believe your segment just now, the way that you hammered out that she's gonna love that. So that's a good one for her there, who will be listening, I'm sure, right away. Now I do want to call out, okay, I also want to publicly live
Oh,
say, oh
all right.
yes,
Before you do
yes,
this, I
yes,
want to,
yes.
I want to say, well, first, I want to say one thing that I think we also need to talk. I'm just sort of thinking out loud here when I talk about, oh, well, we need to do an episode about streaming services. We need to do an episode about historic preservation. No, we do not need to do an episode about historic preservation, but we should talk at some point about what constitutes a spoiler, because I think
Yes,
that
well, yeah, go
I
ahead.
think
Sorry,
folks
sorry.
are
Yep.
overly sensitive to that. We're talking about a show that involves musicians, and you said, I don't want to give anything away, but you're not giving anything away because you're talking about them writing music. And
Right,
if someone
exactly.
can't
So it was very
anticipate that a show
light.
with musicians is going to involve the composition of music, then I don't know. So we should talk about, where does the line exist for a spoiler? But I just wanted to flag that. That's a conversation for another time.
I actually
What
have that note in this segment, so you read my mind. I'll come back to that. Go ahead though on your.
but I've really I've wanted to I've been thinking about this for a while, and just kind of wanted to share this with you. And it's a maybe seems a little off topic, but it's something I think you might be able to relate to. I often say that I've reached the point in my life where I'm perfectly happy admitting when I've made a mistake or when I'm wrong. And in fact, I often tell my wife and my family that I enjoy being wrong, and I enjoy admitting when I'm wrong, because it happens so infrequently that it's really just an absolute delight, right? I mean, we're talking like at the most twice a year, right? So it's like, it's almost like Christmas, being able to admit that I have made a mistake. And knowing what I know about you, Ari, I imagine that you have a very similar experience in the world, and sort of a very similar worldview. And so I'm wondering, is there anything that you want to share with us?
Yes, nice segue there. So yeah, I'm also one of those of the saying them right a lot of the time, and I feel that way, right? And I've fact checked a lot. I've fact checked a lot of the time to prove how right I am. I'm now going to live on the show say I was very, very wrong about something. Okay, you had brought up Severance. I had said, I got through one sode or something like that. It was off-putting, it was strange, it made me feel uncomfortable. I tried it and then I ran for the hills. Okay. I also now want to splice in the first comment from listeners. Okay. And I'm going to give you uh um before I say his name, though, I just want to bring up in Severance, which now I'm a huge fan, and tell you why in a second. They all go by their name and then the first letter for their last name, kind of like AA, right? Which I thought was just really funny. They say Heli R in particular was always my favorite, right?
Mark S.
Mark S. Exactly. So, a good friend of mine and a mega fan now of the show, a Cameron H, also text bombed me after listening to the first episode, just devastated and saying that basically I was ashamed for dissing Severance and saying that it was one of the top best shows of the last 3 years. And he almost wants to put it back into the golden era that I had talked about, the last kind of show, maybe even though it missed my golden era by a couple years, he thought it was to that standards. In my defense, a show should never take 7 episodes, in my estimation, to get amazing. I begrudgingly watched 1 through 5. I kind of liked it. It was enough to just keep me going, and also because you actually got lucky because of the desert that's going on still right now, which we're going to get to once we get to my top five. I don't have that many great shows to watch. So I kept being like, well, I guess I'll go back to Severance. And then slowly it was hooking me. Even though I did, I think by episode 5, denounce you one last time. I said, I'll never watch this again. I trickled my way into 6. And then miraculously, by episode 7, 8, 9, no, 9, because 9 is the finale. They don't have a 10. It went from to one of the greatest shows of the last 5 years. I mean, you were right. We talked about this. I don't know what happened, but I think the slow build, they almost made it so slow that they had to do that character building and the story build up. So then when it hits its crescendo, it just knocks you on your feet. I mean, it was just unbelievable. I mean, for folks that haven't seen Severance, if you have patience, because it will mess with you if you don't. I don't want to get too much into it, but the idea of Severance is the work-life balance. People have elected to take a severed job, meaning they sever their brain. And so when you go to work, you don't remember going to work, right? So that you don't have to bring that baggage, and vice versa. So it's a very interesting, and I'm not really doing giveaways again, which we'll get into in a second, that you learn that right off in the first 10 minutes. That's the idea of the whole show. Anyway, going back into why I mean, just slowly, the 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 writing is just so unbelievable, because what the characters are just slowly going through is of like, and again, I don't want to give too much away, but they're not, of course, liking their situation, and they want to get out or whatever, and just the way that it goes. I'm going to kind of shut up there. We talked about this, it was one of the best finales maybe ever. And so I went, anyway, live, I'm saying this, I went from an to like, this is, I mean, now I'm scouring the internet. When is season 2? It's all they're giving. Okay, so uh Mr. Scott has given us that it's 2024, but no date yet. Late 2024 is all I'm reading. Okay. So for people that can deal with kind of I wouldn't say this is a dystopia, but it's definitely a strange world that they're living in, where, you know what I mean? It's not normal society where they have this just, and if people can deal with that and get through 5 episodes of kind of being, um, it's worth it. So yeah, and then okay, and just also to recap, Severance is Apple TV Plus. Okay, so now let's just for time, let's go into the bear now.
Now, I
Okay.
just want to say, I do want to
Yeah,
say
yeah,
one more thing
yeah.
to the folks who do watch it, who make it to episode 6, who fall in love in the way that you do, who are dying to watch season 2, in an effort to bide your time. Rewatch season 1, because suddenly all of these things that you thought were insignificant in episodes 1 through 5 are tremendously significant. So it's the patience that you exercise will pay off. It will pay off in episode 6, 7, 8, 9, but then it will
Oh,
also pay off on a second viewing.
I know. I mean, I remember you had said that, and I do actually think that's kind of interesting. So, like, when I sometimes do the rewatches. Now I'll be like, oh my god, that's amazing. But the thing is, I kind of feel, I don't know if that should be the case. I kind of feel like in today's world, you got to get there quicker. You like, if it's not there, but like, even Succession took me 3 to 4 episodes. I remember being like, oh wait, okay, I went from being like, I don't like this family, what is going on here, to, oh, okay, this is great. I just feel like they extended it too long. But anyway, okay, now let's flip back to some feedback that you had. Now, I'm also, actually, I need to bring back this is going to be a perfect segment here, because I'm also bringing back user comments. Okay. So let me look this up on the fly. Corey S has denounced somewhat my ranking of the bear being that high. Okay. The sad thing is, I could not read her entire comments because you have not seen season 2 yet. And her comment, it's not a spoiler, but her comment would give you some sort of, so I'm just going to paraphrase. And she says, love a good list. Unpopular opinion, did not like the bear. If I hear cousin one more time, ugh. The blank was unbearable. A certain episode, which I actually disagree, Corey. That's the episode that turned me, but we'll wait until Christopher's caught up until we really diagnose that episode. Very unrealistic and too many cameos, distracting. Anyway, that episode. So sorry, I kind of gave some stuff away.
I
So
feel
you
like
you
I feel like this person Corey is trolling us. I mean, that
no,
can't
she's serious. She's serious.
be
So
real. You
yeah,
can't
so
watch that show and think that.
yeah, let's hear your bear spiel and how right I was.
I'd like to talk about the bear. So the I mean, look, I don't even know where to begin. Okay, the bear is. I've seen the majority now of season 1, and the reason that I haven't finished season 1 is because I started at the beginning again. I did what you refer to as the Christopher rewatch
Yeah.
mid-season because I'm so into it, right? And I just really want to make sure that I'm getting all of the details. And so I've started watching it now with my wife, and my wife sort of corroborated everything that I felt about it and everything I had shared with you about it. She said this is the single best show on television right now.
Oh,
And
she's saying that now too?
yes, yes,
Wow.
and
Just
and
after
and
a couple sods?
just after we watched the first 4 again. Or I watched the first
Impressive.
4 again,
Okay.
and
I love
she
being
watched
right.
4 with me. Yeah.
Continue.
The one thing I'll say about the bear, I mean, it is easy to get through quickly because the episodes are very short, and I don't like that. I wish that
Mm,
they were longer. I don't like it, not because I feel like it compromises the storytelling, but just because I want more. I want more
yeah.
content, and
Right.
but look. So the bear takes place in Chicago. I am from Chicago, and I bragged before about having a New York birth certificate, which I do, and I consider myself to be both a Chicagoan and a New Yorker, which is sort of like an interesting hybrid. But I spent the majority of my formative years and young adult life in Chicago. And my family is all from Chicago, and a lot of them still live in Chicago. So I am deeply connected to that city. I have never seen such a beautiful or accurate portrait of Chicago as exists in The Bear. Now, one of the things that I have found fascinating is that Chicago viewers and Chicago critics, some of them, say that The Bear fails to capture the spirit and the grittiness of the city. And to that, I say, these people must be so deeply uncomfortable with how accurate the Bears' portrayal of Chicago is that they are just sort of blocking it or rejecting it as a psychological defense mechanism. But in reality, that show is Chicago. And another critic, I read a review this guy wrote in the Chicago Reader, which is not really sort of like the bastion of Pulitzer Prize winning journalism, but in any case, it is a publication that has some amount of influence in Chicago. And this person criticized Eben Moss-Bachrach's accent, saying that it wasn't a good Chicago accent. It wasn't nuanced enough, something like that. I've yet to hear an actor with a better Chicago accent,
It was
including
very
actors
good.
who are from Chicago. I mean, it was perfect. It was absolutely perfect. And so that alone, right? Just the very sort of like spirit and nature and tenor of the show is just spot on, and it's perfect. And then you start to look at these characters, you start to look at the dialogue, you start to look at the way that each of them has his or her or their own voice. It is a perfect show. It's fantastic. And the pace of the show is great, and the soundtrack, Oh my God. Pearl Jam, Wilco. I mean, it's just, there is nothing about the show that I don't like. And it reminds me, Ari, of some plays, some stage plays that came out of Chicago theater in the Chicago theater scene in the late 1970s and early 1980s. Plays by David Mamet, who
Mm,
is like the quintessential at the time, the quintessential Chicago playwright. In 1977, he wrote a play called American Buffalo, which was later turned into a film with Dennis Franz from NYPD Blue and Dustin Hoffman. And then in 1984, he wrote another play called Glengarry Glen Ross, which play is set in Chicago. There was a film version with Al Pacino, Jack Lemmon, Ed Harris, Kevin Spacey, Alec Baldwin, Alan Arkin. Highly recommend that you watch that. But the film version is set in Sheepshead Bay in Brooklyn, not
mm.
sort of changes the overall tone. But in any case, David Mamet was able to capture the spirit of a city in a way that no other writer has been since then until now.
Wow.
And now we have Chicago encapsulated perfectly, beautifully, wonderfully in all of its gritty, terrible imperfection on the screen, on FX for Hulu Plus, whatever you want to call it. Pay,
FX for Hulu.
pay, subscribe, get it, subscribe, pay the extra so you don't have to watch it with commercials. Oh my God. I
And
mean,
this is
I've never seen anything like this.
what's so funny is that you're only 5 episodes in, right? And so I even, if you remember my original assessment, the first season was great, but I wasn't floored. I liked it. And there was a couple, I thought episodes would go up and down. Remember, I told you it was kind of like life, or not every day is great. But then once you get through the muck and the mire, the crescendo's even better, because it's like, once you get to season 2, if you like it now, there's a couple episodes, again, the one that actually Corey is denouncing, I loved it, turned me. There is and I can't bring up the actors that's in it, but you'll see. And then the final couple were just so, I think it was really the final 2 that ended it so nicely. Anyway, we'll get to when the new season's coming. So love that I'm right. Now, the final bit here before we move on to the next segment is, and I'd love that you instinctively called this out, Christopher. I had a little note to say, first of all, what is a spoiler? Can we have a gray area? 2 is, should there be a time threshold of how long a show has been out before we can actually talk about aspects that could be considered spoilers? So that's something we don't need to figure it out now. Maybe throw it out to our listeners as a good question out there to the world. I'm a little conflicted because I'd like to, like, if it's The Sopranos, we should be able to talk about what happens in the damn finale. At the same time, there could be viewers coming to the Wally Report for support, looking for classics, and maybe they don't want to know what happens. So I'm a little torn on that. But so what do you think about that? I mean, we can iron that out over time, right?
You know, yeah, it's tough to say. I think that um, I, I, The Sopranos is an example of a show that I watched uh many years after it aired, and so
Exactly.
lots and lots had been written about the finale, and I knew what happened in the finale sort of very generally, but that knowledge didn't make sense to me without having seen the show. So I knew how it was going to end, but the ending was no less impactful. I think it's safe to talk about the ending of a show like The Sopranos. I think any show that is sort of come and
20
gone, we
years
can
old
talk
at this
about. Yeah,
point. Like, we
exactly.
can talk
But
about it.
but
Okay.
but the question is, can we talk about season 2 of The Bear? Season 3 is about to come out, or is it still protected? And I'm
Still
really actually,
protected.
yeah, but I don't know. I want to know what. I want to know what people think, and also, maybe we then just put in our show notes
Yeah.
potential
Right.
spoilers, or we
Right.
say
That's
so.
true.
I'm interested to know what our listeners think. Um, Comment on Instagram. comment on Spotify. You can email us. I'll give you all of the credentials at the end of the show. But I want to hear from you. And we have some listeners who have made some really smart, insightful commentary. There's a listener that Ari, you're familiar with, Jessica Drew, who had a lot of really interesting.
Jessica D. So I
Thank
meant
you.
to, yeah, sorry, not
I'm
to
so
cut you off,
sorry.
but I meant from now on, in
Now
honor
on.
of Severance, it always is that way when we talk
Okay.
about comments. Anyway, continue.
Hello,
Sorry.
my name is
That's how much.
Jessica D. I'd like to hear from her, and a few others. Some
Yes.
sort of really detailed reflections on what constitutes a spoiler.
Okay, great. So before we get into, I know people are still just dying for our top five. I do want to go through a couple other quick listener comments and answer. So another new huge fan of the show. And this is actually great because it's a great question because it goes into something that I said we would help with on episode 1. A Luke S. Okay. Says, huge fan here. I don't want to pay for 30 different streaming services, which is exactly an issue I brought up with. In your opinion, what is the best overall streaming platform currently and your favorite of all time? Rangers in 6. Great Rangers call out. Now, great question, Luke. One of the best questions of the day. All time, you got to just go HBO Max, which now is just called Max because I like to be very detailed about things. I think it just has had the best titles over all the years, and it has all the catalog, so it's definitely the best of all time. Currently is very hard. I don't think I can give an answer. So what I at least wanted to do is I wanted to review the current approved Wally Report streaming service list really quickly. Netflix, Max, Apple TV Plus, Hulu, Paramount Plus, Showtime, FX, AMC/AMC Plus, because some are only on AMC Plus, not on the regular network. Disney Plus, Prime Video, Peacock, barely, and even ESPN Plus. I had to add that because I'm a sport doc junkie. So I might even be missing one or two. Those are all the approved services that we will be discussing shows. I can't really give you an answer right now on the best currently in the world. It would probably still be HBO Max, but barely. I know you might disagree with this, but maybe, I mean, Netflix is in my top 3 just because it's a hub for a lot of things and there is good originals, but I don't know. So Luke, I'll have to think about it and get back to you. I can't. Here's the real answer is you can't just pick one anymore. You have to at least get 3 to 4. So let's do this. I'll give you, this is the best answer, Luke. You have to have Netflix, you have to have Max, you have to have Apple TV Plus, you have to have Hulu, you have to have Disney Plus, you have to have Prime. So you can probably,
That's thousands of dollars a year that you're talking about.
yeah, okay. So
Peter,
then
wait,
yeah.
I want to get clarity from Luke, because I think it's a great question, and I think
Yeah.
you sort of raised two potential ways of thinking of it. What the first way is, what has the best shows now, and the second is, what has the best library. And so
Yes.
are you taking this one streaming service to a desert island, right? And is this the one and only streaming service that you will ever be able to access, right? So if we're sort of playing that kind of hypothetical scenario,
Yeah.
Max all the way. HBO hands down has the best library. Most of the shows, most of the really iconic and impactful shows that we talked about in our first episode were HBO shows, right? HBO paved the way, and they've continued to be a leader. The other, if we're approaching it the other way, what has the best show that's hot right now? That's variable, and that's sort of that it's very difficult to pin down. And so I think what we need to do is we need to come up with kind of a roadmap for our listeners, or a technique of when to subscribe and when to cancel. I think people don't realize how easy that is. And you just, on your phone, you subscribe and cancel right away. Right. So then you've got it for a month and you don't have to worry about recurring billing. If you have an iPhone, if you don't have an iPhone, I have no advice for you about anything.
I love that you said that. That's actually a great one. You sometimes need shows that are outside of the top 3 to 4 services. So doing that, exactly that. If you hear about, like, for example, even The Bear, not everybody has Hulu, right? Get it 1 month, blast the seasons, cancel. And you can do that with some of the services, right? So that is a move that you can do.
Yeah. So I think we should think about how do we create a 6 month roadmap, a
Yeah.
rolling six, for our
Yeah. Yeah.
listeners, that provide sort of the most cost effective way to enjoy as many of these shows, maybe not all, but as many of these shows as possible. In because yes, ideally they have all of the services simultaneously that you listen to. Not
Right.
everyone needs or wants that. So I think we
So
can
let's
find
do,
a solution.
so I say we do a whole episode on that at some point within a couple months, and we'll give you the must haves that are always on, and then the contingency plans for the other ones that are the sometimes haves, if you will, right?
Absolutely,
And,
absolutely.
the lesser needs. So, okay, one other comment, and I do want to get to our final bit here.
Yeah, I'm
Uh,
dying for the top five,
I
but
know,
let's
I
hear
know.
this comment.
Yes, yes. So another good point from a Matthew L. Okay, last user comment for the night. Um, Great show. I look forward to the next one. Just a few thoughts on the ranking scale, which I'm going to refresh the listeners before we get to the top 5. Might you consider rewatchability as a separate way? Another criteria. And
Yes.
here's my only thought with it, Matt, is if it's a great show, shouldn't rewatchability probably be high, but maybe not because of the nature of the show. Maybe there's like reveals or something that you're like, once you know it, it's less spectacular. So rewatching it a lot doesn't work. But I think I'm going to add it. I've already actually added it. So here is a refresher on what I'm always looking for: overall enjoyment, excitement, emotional investment, which is why I had that high there for Daisy Jones, which is why I let other things slide. You see what I mean? Acting, of course, writing, so big for me, dialogue and just story, cinematography slash groundbreaking camera work, new, like even with Breaking Bad, I rewatched it and there's always those inventive beginnings that the creator would always, very interesting, shots. Editing and CGI can also play a big part of that same, I think, realm somewhat. If it's like a Marvel show and it's, knocking you off your feet, I don't usually care about that as much, but it can be interesting. World creation, the tone, the feel, and I don't, maybe even the art direction. That's for you there, Christopher. In that world, did they create the tone that you're looking for? Is it a world you want to be in for seasons and years, right? Um, Insightful. Are you learning new things? This was another big one that I bring up. Not all shows are just sitting there and you're vegging out. You can learn a lot from interesting shows that are very smart, and it may be introducing you to a new world that you're not normally in. Like for The Bear, I'm not a big restaurant guy. I don't usually care that much about what chefs are doing, but they make it so interesting so that you're like, oh, wow, this is a crazy world. I want to know more about this. Are you dying for the next episode? That's a big one for me recently because I haven't had a lot of those until those last 3 Severance sods. Okay. And then the final bit is your taste, your preference. This can add a little bias. It's almost unfair to have on the list because if it's a great show, it shouldn't really matter your taste. But for I'm not going to watch horror, for example. The other people might not, want to watch. I don't know that just does things that don't float their boat. So that maybe is something that we shouldn't have in, but it does sometimes, is part of the package. And then I'm now adding rewatchability. Okay, I think that's a pretty great list.
I think it's a
Top
fantastic list.
top shows of May 2024. We finally made it. We made the listeners wait. That's what we do here. We like to have healthy conversations, and then you hit them. Now, here's the only thing that I'm a little bit bummed with. Now, if you remember from episode 1, I was saying that the landscape wasn't great. I couldn't even give you an April top 5 yet. I struggled with May. So this is not going to be the Wally Report's best list, but I got to tell you, by June, by July, we're going to really be in business. And I'll tell you why, because I'm going to give you previews for the next month. So here we go. Top 5 of May 2024. Drum roll. Now, before I go to number 5, I got to just bring up Shogun. It's getting hot tomato scores. I think it's like 100%. I have various people, a coworker, family members, uh, multiple people saying they love Shogun. I've given it 4 episodes. I can't put it on the top 5. I just don't know. I don't know what I'm watching. I don't know if it doesn't seem that epic. It's not a Game of Thrones level. I just thought it was going to be the new Japanese samurai Game of Thrones. I've been waiting 8 months for this show, and I'm going to keep at it, everybody. I'm going to give you a couple more episodes, but it's just not. I just wanted to at least let people know why it's not on the top 5. I've tried. I just can't do it. So in its place, number 5 is Curb Your Enthusiasm season 12. Okay, it's already ended. It's on HBO Max for people that don't know, but that's almost ridiculous if you don't know that at this point, because it's one of those groundbreaking HBO shows. It is 94% on the tomatoes. But here's the interesting thing, and this is going to be a theme on my countdown. It's only 68 on the audience. I actually am disappointed by this season, but because of the landscape, I had to give it a number 5 because I felt that there was more times I was enjoying myself and laughing at Curb season 12 than I was with Shogun. And so therefore I had to give it to my number 5 slot. But overall, let's just break down Curb. It's obvious for people that don't know, it's Larry David. To me, it's the best comedy in the history of comedies. Well, maybe Ali G still holds a little bit over it, but it's very close. Just because Ali G was 2 seasons on HBO, I don't count the BBC, and Curb is 12 seasons. So just for the volume, you got to give it to Larry. And we all know Larry's a national treasure. He's the creative force around Seinfeld and then Curb. He's a genius in my eyes. But I'm pretty much a purist from really seasons 6 to 7. Everything else has slowly fallen down over time. So this season isn't as great, but there's still amazing moments. I'm actually only halfway through, and I'm still going to give it the number 5 spot. I just want to ask Christopher really quickly, where are you in your Curb journey? Like, how much have you seen?
I've seen every season but the last season, and the
Okay.
only other thing I haven't seen is that special or that pilot episode that you talked about
Oh,
in our last episode. I haven't seen
oh my
that,
God.
but I've seen.
Okay.
Okay,
Yeah.
come on.
No,
I've
no, I know.
seen.
I'm just saying you got to go back. I'm almost happy for you. It was,
I know,
oh
but
my
it's.
God of joy.
Oh,
Sorry,
okay,
go
all
ahead.
right. But I feel like
Yeah.
I've covered a fair amount of ground. Some seasons are better than others. Some episodes are better than others. I sort of accept the show and all of its quirky imperfections.
Yeah.
Um, it's never been my absolute favorite, but it's always been sort of a staple and something that I return to consistently. I feel like we have had the final season of Curb Your Enthusiasm about 6
Multiple
times.
times. Yeah.
Yeah. And so it's sort of like Michael Jordan retiring. And so I'm kind of wondering whether this is actually the last season.
It is. I think he's finally saying it, and he's even been listened to a bunch of podcasts, and he's kind of, maybe there'll be one more, but I
Yeah, but
think this
remember
is
they
it.
retired Michael Jordan's jersey. They built a statue of him in front of the United Center, and then he came back. And Larry David said Curbed is over after, what was it? I don't season I
I
don't
don't remember.
remember.
I think 10, 8, 9,
Yeah.
or 10. He did the first. Yeah, I'd have to
And
look
then
it
he
up, but
came back however many years later. I'm just, fool me once.
right. Yeah.
I think that I will watch it, and I'm excited to watch it.
Yeah, so I threw it on there more to pay homage to him. We all know I'm a major Larry David fan. I think this is probably the last season. I got to get it on a top 5. It's not going to make the top 10 of the year, hopefully, for this season anyway. But it is one of the. I've been also doing. I rewatched the old seasons and just to relive some of the magic, and it still is just unbelievable. Okay, number 4. This is going to the sports people on the sports listeners. And again, since I was struggling with my top five, I had to go out a little bit of the normal realm. There was a Patriots Dynasty documentary series. Okay, that was on Apple TV Plus. Apple TV Plus is now going to be popping up a little bit more on these countdowns. First one was HBO, now we're Apple TV Plus. This is another interesting one where the critics are giving this 100% on the tomatoes, but the audience is giving it 56%. So a little bit like Curb, where the critics are saying 94 and the audience is saying 68. Very weird. So I don't think it's the best. Even the Tom Brady doc that came out a couple years ago called Man in the Arena was far more superior. It blew my mind. It was one of the greatest top 10 sports docs of all time. Okay. This one was pretty good. And there, I think there was, overall, it was impressive. And I'm a sports guy. So I love even though I was not a Patriots fan, everybody knows I'm a Giants fan, right? But over time, I respected the story of what they did, Tom Brady, Belichick. I will say, so anybody who just needs sports docs, it's great. I will say that they really had a narrative to just go after Belichick in this one, which I was a little surprised by. And his interview in it is almost painful. They're really blaming him for a lot of the downfall of the dynasty, which he definitely has a big role in, but I felt like they took that a little bit too far. Anyway, it's a great, it goes through all the different years from the old, even before Brady showed up, and all the way till the end before he goes to Tampa Bay. I definitely recommend it. Okay, we're moving on to number three because I know you don't even have any. You're not going to watch that Patriots
I
doc.
have nothing to say about that. I think it's
Exactly.
great.
That's why I did.
I'm really happy that you enjoyed that.
Yeah. Number three is a new show. And so this is going to be interesting because this will be the first time that we have a newer show that's only 3 episodes in. It's on the top five, but then when we get to next month, will it maintain the spot? It's almost like it's going to be like this revolving countdown. So Dark Matter, it's called. It's a new show, also Apple TV Plus, starting to have interesting. Severance is Apple TV Plus. You know why I jumped to it? Severance ended. I was devastated. There was a hole in my heart. I needed to fill it. I read about Dark Matter, which is 78% critics, 71 audience. So it's meeting the threshold. It's not amazing scores, but as long as I see that 70, we're good. And I'm not giving anything away here, but it's similar to kind of a Severance feeling where in Dark Matter, what happens is they're basically you have different choices, and in sort of like almost a Doctor Strange way, there's different versions of you in different universes. Okay, so let's say, Christopher, you went to college, you then took some job, and then that went somewhere, versus you declining the job or whatever. You make different life choices and you go on different paths. Dark Matter looks at, what if I went down this path, and this, so there could be various Christophers throughout the different universes. In this show, and I don't want to give too much away, universes might collide, and there's different versions of you. And to me, that's always, I like it. It's thought provoking, because I always think about, what if I did this one thing 8 years ago that would have completely changed the course of my life? So I do like thinking about that. So it's kind of a riveting subject. I wouldn't say it's perfect. But it's just doing enough to be on my top five currently right now. Joel Egerton is in it, Jennifer Connelly. So good cast, great acting. There's some people I don't know if I love as much as others, but so far we're definitely into it in the household, and we're excited to see the next episode. So and it kind of fills that, because Severance was just so interesting about that weird work life balance, and you always think about that, and then this kind of takes it another step further of, well, what if I made this one decision 8 years ago that could have changed my entire life? So you haven't watched this yet, correct?
I've not watched it. It sounds very intriguing. I will watch it once all of the episodes are out, so that I can watch them in succession. Dark Matter is also the name of the new Pearl Jam album, which was
Right.
released
Yes.
on Record Store Day this year, back in April. And what you've described also reminds me of that film with Gwyneth Paltrow from the '90s, Sliding Doors. Do you remember that
I didn't see it.
film? Okay, that
I didn't
so
see it.
Sliding Doors was 1998, and it was a Sliding Doors is a reference to the doors on the London Tube,
Mm.
and she misses her train, and then they replay the scene, and she gets her train. She makes the train,
Oh,
and two
right.
parallel narratives play out based on whether or not she um, makes or misses the train. And so similar concept. In terms of these dual narratives. I imagine I'd spent a long time since I've seen Sliding Doors. I'm sure that it's, you know, I don't think history's probably been very kind to it, um,
Right.
and that it's aged particularly well. But I do like that concept.
Yeah,
And
it's interesting. Like, I
yeah,
don't know if this does it perfectly well, but they do it well enough to I'm like, all right, this is, I could watch this and I'm not complaining because a lot of other shows that I want to get into it, I'm just throwing them away and I'm complaining and I'm stopping them. And this is like, this at least holds me. So, okay. And it's also based on a book. And I feel like right now, because of the writer's strike and all that, the better stuff is coming, I think, from a lot of these genius books, if you will. Right. Okay. Number two, Griselda on Netflix, starring Sofia Vergara in an amazing performance. Uh, if you've seen Cocaine Cowboys, because I know I know you're a big Miami cocaine scene doc guy from the looks of you. It was an amazing doc that came out, I don't know, 5 to 10 years ago. She was a big character. She's is a drug lord in late 70s, early 80s Miami. And it was rare to have a female during that time period. Sofia Vergara puts on prosthetics for this performance, and it's actually quite great. It again wasn't my favorite show ever, but right now, because of the landscape, 87% on the tomatoes critic, only 71 on audience. So that's been the theme tonight, where it seems like the Rotten Tomatoes are giving great scores and the audience is kind of okay. um Basically, it's if you were did you ever watch Narcos? Did you watch any of the Narcos seasons? Okay, so for all the listeners that have, it's an amazing show. There was six different seasons. Narcos followed Pablo Escobar, right? And then it got into a Narcos Mexico for multiple seasons that was also maybe even equally, maybe even better, that followed all the drug movement during those years and the cartels and all that stuff. To me, if you're dying for a new Narcos, this is the closest you're going to get. It's kind of shot in a similar fashion that everything it kind of just feels like an extended Narcos season, but featuring Griselda Blanco. Okay, it's not perfect. She drives me nuts with some of her, but her decision making. But that's just what she did in real life. So what can I say? I can't complain about the writing because it's actually what happened. But it's definitely entertaining. I think she's going to be up for Emmys. It's a great. If you like that type of thing, there's a lot of violence. It's a lot of obviously drugs in that, but I love that time frame from the late 70s into the early 80s. Of that shift of Miami being this sleepy retirement town to all of a sudden this booming sort of coke party haven that we all see in Scarface and things like that, right? So, um, I don't know if this is up your alley, Christopher, but I think a lot of listeners, especially the Narcos folk, will really like this. Okay,
so
yeah.
I think I mean I actually it is up my alley because of the time period.
Mm,
And so you wouldn't, I wouldn't normally gravitate towards like crime drama necessarily, but 1970s Miami. I will say, Blow with Johnny Depp is one of my favorite movies. I think it's an excellent movie, and it's same subject matter,
yes,
same time period covered. Uh,
yes.
so surprisingly, uh, you wouldn't necessarily associate someone who's staunch historic preservationist with movies about the cocaine trade, but uh, there are exceptions to be made, and this could be one of them.
Yeah, so definitely a good time, right? If you like that type of thing. Now we've come to the number one show, and I gotta say, I'm kind of cheating a little bit here. Things will get cleaned up over the year, but because of just the landscape, again, I had to cheat a little bit here. Now, of course, as most people know me or talking to me, I am obsessed with the Jinx. It's the hottest true crime doc series ever, I think. I mean, the story is just crazy. But what I'm doing here is a little bit of the residual love for season one, and I'm kind of amplifying illegally season two. Season two now, so just to backtrack, season one came out all the way in 2015. I hope most of the listeners have seen this. I know you haven't, which is shocking. You got to put it on the list. It's about the Durst family, Robert Durst. He's a big time heir to one of the largest real estate families in New York, which you'll like because there's a building history. They're not all the amazing architecture, but they're all through Times Square and all through New York. They own 11 buildings still now throughout New York, and they're $1 billion corporation. Okay, I don't want to give too much away again, but season one is just immaculate. I mean, it is just the best. It'll completely blow your mind from the crimes and murders that this guy has walked from. It's sort of like a Houdini act. I just don't think there's any other true crime story that can live up to it. Now, season two has just started 9 years later, and it's definitely not as good. But just because it's an extension of the story that we're obsessed with and that we love. I just finished the entire podcast series while I've been driving to work because I can't think about anything else. It's just the best. The current season again is a little bit okay. He's older. I can't really, I can't tell you what's happening because that will give stuff away if you haven't seen it. It's definitely not as fantastic, but it's just the elongation of this story. It is to back me up too. It is 88% on Rotten Tomatoes, even for season two. But there is no audience score yet. But I will just say, definitely package it with season one. What I did is I rewatched season one because just season two alone, and it's not done yet. We're only 5 episodes in. I think there's like one more. It's definitely a little anticlimactic because of the way, and I know you haven't seen this yet, the way that the Jinx season one ends is maybe one of the best endings to any true crime or any show ever, up to your better cleaner than Severance at this point, but we'll see. So and I can't tell you why. If you've seen the show, everybody knows why. So that's my top 5. Anyway, before we move on, any comments about the Jinx? I know you're interested at least in this story somewhat, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'm intrigued. I'm intrigued, despite my sort of general aversion for these true crime documentaries. I would be willing to make an exception in this case.
Okay, it just will blow. Okay, to double down, the story is so unbelievable. It just blows your mind of what what the police didn't do, what this guy was able to get away with for decades is just like out of this world. You've never heard a story so crazy. And I know maybe you're not a true crime guy, but you'll probably like some of the New York history and the buildings because it's the Durst family. And so some of that you might eat up. Okay. So that's our top 5. I promise you June's going to be better. I'm going to get to why it will be better. I'm dying for June, but I wanted to give you your day in the sun here. I'm going to give you the one Christopher extra pick, Gilded Age and season 2, because that was 2023. Okay, so I know that, guys, I know this isn't 2024, so we're cheating, but Christopher gets his one pick. He did bring it up on the last episode, so I want him to be able to tell us briefly why. But before you start, I do want to give you a backup here. 94% on the Tomatoes critic. However, a shocking, dismal 59% on the audience score. We've seen that's been a weird trending theme all night here. So anyway, really quickly, why Gilded Age Why do you like this? And and season 3 I think is on the way. I should have got that date for this, sadly, but give us a little bit of what you're thinking.
So the Gilded Age, season one starts in the 1880s, 1882 in New York City, the year before the Brooklyn Bridge opened. The Brooklyn Bridge opened in 1883. And it is a story of old money and new money in New York City. It takes place on what was then the far reaches of the Upper East Side, but what is in fact um, I think 65th Street, something in the low 60s, um, and it is a cast that is deep and wide in talent, and they do a wonderful job of illuminating the history of late 19th century New York City and recreating all of the drama that characterized that period. And it was a lot of it was related to real estate and to social status. Um, I'm a sucker for that sort of thing, as I think is abundantly clear. I love the art direction in the show. I love the little historical references. The architect Stanford White is a character; he makes an appearance. Emily Roebling, who oversaw the construction of the Brooklyn Bridge following her husband's illness. Um, she is also a character. You have the Astors, you have the Vanderbilts. It's a really rich and interesting show. And of course, I'm the sort of person who wants to fact check everything. There's a great Instagram account that does a scene by scene breakdown of every single episode. Uh, uh, Weighing its historical accuracy, and it's that's pretty fascinating. That's really nerdy, and like you have to really want to get very deep into the weeds to be able to appreciate that. But in any case, I recommend the Gilded Age. It's the creator of Downton Abbey. If you like Downton Abbey, you'll love the Gilded Age. If you didn't like Downton Abbey, you probably won't like the Gilded Age,
No,
and you
we
probably
definitely have
shouldn't.
some listeners, even in my family, that I'm sure are jumping for joy when you just said that right now. So we have some people probably on your side. Okay, guys. So the final section here, and then I'll let Christopher take it home. Take it home with our little social blast ending. Is late May, June preview. What is coming? Okay, let's get excited now. Eric is a new series I just sort of investigated. I found out Benedict Cumberbatch is coming in a new true crime series. It looks very interesting about I think a true story. Um, it comes out actually May 30th. I don't have a Rotten Tomato score because it's so new. So that's actually one thing with the upcoming shows. They're not going to have it until it's live, right? So, but it looks good from the preview for the true crime people out there. I know you're not necessarily one, Christopher, but that is a massive market. So let's look. That will be addressed on our next show if it's on my top 5. Now let's get into some stuff I am very excited about. The Boys season 4 launching June 13th on Prime Video. For people that don't know The Boys, it is a dark look at the superhero world. It's very kind of usually when there's a Marvel show, it's always, oh, they're the heroes. This is really like just again a darker look take on superheroes that maybe they're all terrible people. They have these powers, they look good when they're waving at the fans and they're saving babies, and then behind the scenes they're all just these horrible people. So it's a really interesting look at it. The writing's fantastic, the acting's amazing, and then there's of course a troop of people that are sort of anti these superheroes for people, and that's kind of this, they're battling, and that's the show. So it's very, the only thing that I will say, even for my taste, there's some parts that are just, it's so gruesome. The gore is almost, it just becomes a little shocking, and it's almost unneeded. Like, I don't mind violence and action and that kind of stuff, but it's almost just like the creators definitely have a slight screw loose with this show. It's out there. So you got to be into some wild stuff. It's probably one of the most wild shows on TV. But if people haven't seen the boys, it's another. I would have ranked it on my top 23, but the last season we've been waiting has been 2022. I double checked that to make sure I didn't blow the list before. Okay, sports doc. You know, I always got to bring them up. There's a new Roger Federer doc coming June 20th on Prime Video called 12 Final Days. The only thing I will say is I need the whole story. If it's just about the 12 days, I'm going to denounce it. But for right now, it looks amazing. I'm a big Federer fan, not as much as my brother. But anytime there's a new sports doc on the horizon, it's got to be there on my list. And then, of course, we come to The Bear season 3 on June 27th, FX on Hulu. We already know, we don't even need to address it again. It's the number one show in the world right now, currently ranked. It is coming back for the third and hopefully triumphant season. The only bummer is that I think we're going to have our next episode before The Bear comes out. So we won't be able to probably talk about it. We'll have to wait till our July episode. But anyway, that's fine. At least then we'll have something amazing for July. And then I wanted to give one final preview way ahead in August, just in case people are wondering. Only Murders in the Building season 4, which I don't know if you're into. It's definitely, it's a comedy. It's not the same high level drama. You kind of let your guard down. I mean, it's Martin Short and Steve Martin. How can you not like these guys? It's just a fantastic. I don't know if I love the last season as much, but it's still just great. And that comes out August 27th. So I just want to give previews here so you know that when you come to the Wally Report, you get the latest. So now I'm going to let you take it over for our little outro, Christopher. And then, of course, we're going to jam to our theme song.
Thank you so much for listening to the Wally Report, the world's hottest podcast. Please subscribe, follow, comment, like, share, and blast. We're on Spotify. We're on Apple Podcasts. We're on YouTube. We're plowing the gram at the Wally Report. That's at the Wally Report. You can also email us directly, info@wally.report. Again, info@wally.report. There's no .com. .com is out. Please help spread the word. We are indeed doing a great public service, and we need your help to do that. Thank you so much for listening, and we will see you next month.